Hello, viewers of Spell, and welcome to What If Asta Was an Uchiha and had the Sharingan? Yeah, I'm not 100% sure which one I'll name it. But, first, before we get started, two things is one, I am doing this unscripted, and two, we've reached 69 subscribers. Nice. Now, on to the video. Our story starts off over 500 years ago as a portal opened up in what in a 100 years or so would be known as the Clover Kingdom Forsaken Realm. People walked out with fan-like insignias on their back, and other clans. They fled their world and all the violence. Uchihas, Senjus, Uzamakis, and any other clan you suggest putting down below. This happened sometime in between the founding of Konoha and the founding of the Uchiha and Senju clans. Didn't have at this time as much animosity between them, and many wished for peace. Those gathered together and came to this world. They would gain allies with the elves. Discover as the first generation to be born in the Clover Kingdom, that hand signs for jutsus weren't strictly necessary. They could still help, but they weren't necessary, as they intermixed with the local population. The Senjus and Uchihas would divide up territory that wasn't held by elves or humans, their unique powers giving them some leeway. The intermarrying would allow them to have magic, but weak. Weak magic mixed in with chakra and their ninjutsu. And for the sake of the series, I will be Clover Kingdom and the Naruto world run on a similar enough magic system for me to just say chakra is just kind of like the primordial form of magic. They have the same main basic elements, but they aren't attuned to one specific element. As they began spreading out, this would all come to an end, unfortunately, when the human royalty and elven royalties were gonna marry. There was an attack, and a massive battle broke out. One of the Uchihas joined the first Wizard King in the battle against him, summoning a giant Susanoo to battle against the ancient demon. Together they would slay it. The first Wizard King, despite him never knowing that name, would die in this battle, with the Uchiha surviving. Unfortunately, this would not bode well for the Uchihas and the other clans, as the Clover Kingdom would quickly begin expanding, believing themselves to be superior. A war would break out between the clans and the Clover Kingdom. They would blame the Clover Kingdom for the attack on the elves, their allies, as simply due to the Clover Kingdom's superior numbers would be driven out, forced to flee into the Grand Magic Zones, where the Clover Kingdom believes them to have died out. Now we fast forward 500 years to the modern day of the story. A woman leaves a blonde-haired boy with a scroll next to him on the doorstep of a church. As she leaves the child there, wiping away a tear, telling him to grow up nice and strong, and that maybe one day he'll actually meet the rest of his relatives. As she flees and as she goes into the woods, making sure not to get too close to any houses. As the father of the church, which also doubled as an would find the baby named Asta, and that same day. He would decide to found the Hodge Village Orphanage there, and would start taking in other children. Years would go by until there were 7. Yuno had been tasked with delivering information to another chief of a village. He was taking too long and see what was up. When he got there, he saw saw Yuno desperately trying to take a pendant from an older, clearly drunk man, Asta would fill with rage and run for it, kicking the man. The man would stumble back as Asta grabbed the pendant. The man would take a swing, but Asta would kick him in the nuts and just tell Yuno to run. The two boys would run and make it get to safety. Yuno would then tell Asta that his eye, what's up with his eyes? They've turned red. As with the adrenaline wearing off, Asta's eyes would simply go back to normal. Before he got home, even though we would eventually figure out how to trigger it. And with that being said, this is where the story begins. With Asta cutting wood next to the church, excitedly telling Yuno, what do you think my magic's gonna be? You think it's gonna be my fire, wind, or even my eyes? Or maybe some sort of all three? Maybe my magic's the ability to copy other people's magic. As he began prattling off, Yuno just simply saying, Asta, it doesn't matter what your magic's gonna be. I'm still gonna become the Wizard King. As Asta just saying, no, I am. As Yuno just chuckled. We'll just have to see who gets there first. Asta would simply smile back at him, since today was the day they were going to be getting their grimoires. Asta, with the fact that he seemingly had multiple magic types, since they were actually chakra natures, but he didn't know that. As far as he knew, he just had 2 basic magic attributes, along with whatever his eyes were. He had figured out a couple things about them over time, one of which being, if he concentrated, he could turn them on and off, and that there seemed to be some sort of advancement of his powers. When he first awakened them, they turned red with a ring and 1 marking in his eye. Since then, he's figured out how he's been able to make it into 2 markings, and he's found that it's been much more powerful. Father also said he had a gift for Asta once he came back from the Grimoire Tower. Couldn't wait to see what that was. As Asta was excitedly chopping wood, they would grow to the Grimoire Tower like in canon. And like in canon, books would come off of the shelves in the Grimoire Tower. People would accept theirs, some very thick but small, some large but thin. Many more were accepting in between those dramatic extremes. Some were excited to see what type of magic they had. Some seemed surprised, like they were expecting flame magic, but it was explosion magic. Some looked more excited than others. But then Asta would be standing there waiting for his grimoire, but it wouldn't get there. People would look at him shocked. They would quickly start whispering to themselves, Asta can get a grimoire? That's strange. We never sensed magic from him, but he could always use fire and wind. Not great at grimoire. As people started murmuring, surprised, but their surprise would quickly fade away when Yuno received the 4-leaf grimoire. Everyone looked shocked, and their surprise over Asta quickly turned into shock over Yuno getting such a powerful and prestigious grimoire. Asta would just stand there stunned for a minute, as he walked up to Yuno congratulating him on his grimoire. As Asta would just say, looks like you have a good shot of becoming the Wizard King. As before Yuno could say anything, other people would ask him questions and congratulate him on such a powerful at getting a 4-leaf clover. Many had just thought that was a myth, and Asta would just walk away. He would just be in the forest where he would debate what to do. He didn't get grimoire. He was shocked himself. Before he just breathed in and said, you know what? This doesn't matter. Nothing's come naturally to me. I don't have any natural magic. I've had to figure out how to use my powers on my own this whole time. I will become the Wizard King! As he just looked up straighter into the sky. A determined look on his face. Now, before we go on, let me just explain a couple things with Asta. First off, he still worked out, since he didn't seem to have too much magic, it was chakra, and he was able to create flame and manipulate the wind into blades, but he was never super skilled with it. He'll always need to watch out because he kept feeling exhausted after he did too many of them. So he's been working out them and his muscles this entire time in order to attempt to get stronger, and have worked, but he wasn't sure what else to do. Back to the story. Asta would be walking back home, just determined he'll try next year. He could even try going later on today to the Grimoire Tower, see if the old man will let him just stand in the Grimoire Tower for a little while, just to see if it was possible his grimoire was like stuck on a wall or something. But as he passed by, you would see a man with chains who had chained up Yuno. He was quickly taking his grimoire. He was saying something about selling such a prized specimen. Asta would just yell, "Hey, put Yuno's grimoire down, now!" As the man would just look back at him, smirk, and what's a little punk like you gonna do? It doesn't even look like you have a grimoire yet. As Asta would just bring up his hand, making a one-handed gesture he figured out he could use to manipulate his magic, as he just said, "Wind slice!" As a cut of wind came out the man, his chains would come up and block it. As the chains quickly went towards Asta, he would activate his Sharingan and dodge. As he quickly would come in for a blow, but to his surprise, the chains had grabbed him around his waist and arms, throwing him back against the wall. The man with chains would just chuckle. "Some little punk like you thinks you could actually defeat me. I was once a magic knight, and with more magic power than anyone in this village. Besides maybe that Yuno guy. He seems like a real freak. But you seem to even be more of a freak. I can feel something in you, but it's not normal magic. And judging from that wind attack, you're not even that strong with whatever power you do have." As Asta just started looking despairingly. After all, this man who was standing right in front of him was more powerful. There was nothing he could do to save was basically his brother, and there was nothing he could do to defend the man. But then Yuno would just say, "He's not a loser or a freak. He's my rival," as the man with the chains chuckled, as Asta would get a determined look on his face, as he jumped up and punched the man in the gut. The man would stumble back, and Asta would just say, "Sorry for showing you my weakness, Yuno." Before Asta knew it, a dark book would appear in front of him. Asta somehow knew this was his grimoire, as it opened up a page and he reached in and grabbed a large sword. He pulled it out, as he could feel whatever power it had started coursing through him. Using this, he would jump forward as the change mage started freaking out at this kid's speed. He would quickly shoot chains at Asta, but he would cut right through him before slamming the rusty blade into the man, sending him into the wall, knocking him out. The chains binding Yuno would disappear as Yuno summoned his grimoire back. Asta was so happy to have a grimoire. Yuno would later say he was somewhat thought there may have been a little tear coming to Asta's eye, before Asta quickly started panting as Asta and Yuno bumped fist. As then Asta would quickly yell out in pain and pass out. The next thing Asta would know, he would open his eyes in a dark, dark abyss, as a large, phantasmal creature would look down on him, as he just said, "So, you're my host. Not exactly my first choice, but you will do." As Asta just yelled, "Wait, who are you? What am I? Is this some sort of illusion? What?" This large figure with horns and wings Asta would thought looked demonic or evil would just chuckle and say that everything will become clear in time. As Asta looked down, seeing he was standing over some sort of liquid. As Asta would simply focus his energy and burst, trying to break out of the illusion, as it worked, he woke up. Sister Lily, using her magic to examine Asta, would just say, "Asta, you're awake. I'm so glad." As Asta just said, wait, how long was I out? Sister Lily would just look at him and say, oh, just an hour. Looks like you just tired yourself out and fell over. But as Asta would just look at his stomach, there was a marking that was fading on his stomach. He would question what this was. Sister Lily would probably just say, it could be a bruise, but it's going away rapidly. As Asta would just acknowledge that, as Sister Lily would just tell him that the father's been really worried about you. And congratulations on your grimoire. As everything would rush back to Asta as soon as she said that, he would smile at her and say, yeah, and with that, I am going to become the next Wizard King. As she just chuckled. He had been spouting that line for years. Even though at first he said he was going to become the Mr. Wizard King and marry her, that had eventually faded. As she also told him that, Asta, the father has something to give you. Go meeting up with the father, who seemed to be working out some of the stress about one of his children had passed out. He decided to work out some of his stress by cutting wood. As Asta would just say, "Hi, I'm back." As the father would just say, "Glad to see you up." As he would reach behind him, "I have this for you." As he handed him a scroll with a fan on it. Asta was confused. As the father just said, this was left with you when you were left at the church. There was also a piece of paper connected with it that just said to give it to you when you got older. I decided to give it to you when you got your grimoire. As Asta just nodded. As he turned around and he was going to open it, just said, hey, do you know what's in this? As the father just said, no. It's not my place. Whoever wrote that message wanted you to read it. It was my place. As Asta decided he was going to read it in private before mentioning anything to the other members of the church. He wanted to brace himself for any of the information instead of having Sister Lily read it to him, as he would find his favorite tree to climb. He had found that focusing his energy onto a tree, he could climb it without any issue. He didn't really think this was super unique, because as soon as he showed it to Yuno was able to learn it. Same with all of the kids at the orphanage. He just assumed he had discovered a technique that was probably super common in the capital. As he would climb the tree and read the note. The gist of the note would be this, just explaining to Asta that he wasn't dropped off because he wasn't loved. They felt that they couldn't give him a proper life, so they left him at the church. Asta would be happy to hear that. He sometimes wondered. But before that, he would be surprised by the later half. It would explain that he was a descendant of a clan called the Uchiha, due to the presence of a unique ability that his mother, the author of this scroll, had. She was unable to live with them. She was forced to seek out another place to live. That's why she couldn't leave Asta with them. But they were good people, and if he ever had a chance, she wouldn't mind Asta going to see them. There would be no instructions on how to contact them or any of that. But more interestingly, there would be a note saying that there's a good chance his magic's unusual, and that they had a slightly different power than normal people from the Clover Kingdom. And due to this unique trait of hers, it's possible Asta has it different than any modern-day member of the Uchiha clan. She left more details in a box she hid underneath the demon's skull, and that Asta should investigate there if he wants more answers. Alright, that was one long recording session. Now, two things, one of which being, this was just the rough draft of this, so it's going to be a little rougher than normal. Second off is, put in the comments what Naruto clans you want me to add, since more than one clan came to the Clover Kingdom world. And if you think anyone else should be a descendant of a clan or the Uchiha clan, the first thought I can come up with is Magna being a descendant of the Uchiha clan, but having no idea what the Uchiha clan truly is. Other than that, please like, share, and subscribe, comments, that really helps the channel. Check out the What If Anime subreddit. And this will be all for me for this recording, and I'll see you around the channel. This Re, out.